Jackson in the key. Kick out. Davenport.
A steal for Kentucky. Ahead to Reeves. Left wing three. Got it. Jackson weaves.
A dunk. Bounces off to Aiden and he slams it home.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the SEC Connect. Let me pull this a little bit closer. All right, this is a podcast or a show all about basketball, more specifically men's college basketball, and even more specifically SEC basketball. However, because we are in the dead off season of college basketball, other than like transfer portal stuff, but I'm not really going to cover that until the portal's completely closed off. Because it is the dead season of college basketball and playoff time for NBA, I am covering a lot more NBA content as of right now. And speaking of which, today's episode is going to be more of a... I am going to cover just a little bit of actual playoff stuff that's going on right now. But today's episode, I'm going to be detailing / going over what I believe each team should be doing in the offseason. And more, I guess, not each team, but each team that is officially been eliminated from the playoffs. So all 22 teams that are not currently in the playoffs right now, I'm going over their what they should do in the offseason. Because if you ask me, all the teams that are in the playoffs right now, I think their offseason, they should just try and bring back the same squad and continue to contend. But I guess except for, well, yeah, all of them. I was going to say except for Indy. But no, I think they are in a good spot, but I'm moving fast. The first thing I just want to talk about is the Timberwolves series. They just stuff that everyone else is seeing. They came out to a very quick 2-0 lead in the series. This game 2, they had the Nuggets frustrated, especially Jamal Murray. A lot of people think he should have been suspended for throwing the heat pack. I think he should have been, because if you think of it this way, any fan in that arena that throws a heat pack on the court, no matter even if it injures someone, if it hits anybody, if it lands anywhere, if a fan's throwing something, they're getting banned from that arena, probably for life. If not just that arena, the entire any NBA game, they're probably getting banned for life. I mean, Jadeon, if you guys don't remember, was fake falling asleep at a WNBA game courtside and got banned from WNBA and NBA games for life. So if he gets banned for that for life, I don't understand how almost injuring. And I guess they said the reason he didn't get banned or get a suspension is because it wasn't near anybody, even though it was dangerously close to Cat whenever he landed. He could have landed on it, ripped the groin, his hammy. Who knows? I think we all know the real reason is if he's not there, the Nuggets aren't there. I think they want to be a little more competitive, and I guess you can't blame them. It's a money move. But yeah, speaking of which, the Nuggets came back with Jamal Murray being there. He had a really good game. They came back, won game 3 very convincingly. But I kind of expected this. I didn't expect Minnesota to come out and win the first 4 games. I expected them to at least lose one of those home games. So, I would expect them to come back and play a little bit better this game 4, but we'll see. Another one, I guess the Indy and Knicks series isn't too exciting right now. You did have that game winner from Andrew Nembhard, I believe. But other than that, it's just been a basic Knicks series. They're doing really well. Shout out Jalen Brunson. I mean, you obviously have all of their role players on that team. Miami Heat and the Cavs has been a really good series. Okay, speaking of which, I am recording this as of the 11th of May. So what games played today? It was, I know the Miami Heat for sure. Oh, OKC and the Mavericks. So I am not the Miami Heat, but I'm going to check this Cavs-Boston game because I actually don't know who won, so I'll be right back. All right. As I suspected, Boston did win, putting them up 2-1. Cavs did put up a good fight this last game, mainly Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland was there a little bit, so shout out to the Cavs. I think this series is going to go just like the Heat series. I think it's just going to continue to be a downhill from here for the Cavs. I guess they have an offseason I could talk about, but that's not the video. I might throw them in at the end if I feel like it. If I have time, I might do it. But OKC and Mavericks, they did just play today. The Mavericks, they took the 2-1 lead after the Thunder completely went out and put them to bed in that very first game they played. Mavericks answered back and won the next 2 games. I'm expecting OKC to do something. I'm not expecting them to go down 3-1, but if they do, That's scary for the OKC, but I expect them to come and punch back in this next game. They played pretty good this game. They just couldn't overcome Luka or Kyrie. They were starting to play a little bit of they were just fouling Derek Lively, trying to get him to the line, and he ended up making like 4 or 5 in a row. So then they stopped doing that. Obviously, it wasn't working. It's been a little exciting for that series, but I am expecting them to come back and do something. And I believe that is all the series I just covered right there. I kind of just went quick over them because there's not too much to talk about yet. We're kind of still early into the series, and that's not the point of this video. Speaking of the point of this video, we are going to get straight into it. I'm going to be going from lowest seed to highest seed, starting in the Eastern Conference, and then I'm going to go on to the West Conference and start from lowest seed to the highest seed. So getting right into it, Detroit. Obviously, we know they set the record for the longest losing streak in NBA history this season. Not a very good season. So for their offseason, obviously rebuilding is one of them, so that's not really the point. And just a quick side note, each team, I pretty much have 3 notes for each team, like 3 main topics that I want to cover for each team's offseason, or just 3 points I want them to do, basically. So for Detroit, their first point is get some vets and develop a culture. They had some vets on this team. They traded them away. You look at the Knicks trade, and then who else do they have? I think the Knicks trade was pretty much it. Where they traded away not Bogdan Bogdanovic. Or Bojan, not Bogdanovic. They're basically the same. They are the same name, different pronunciation. But they need to get some more vets and develop a culture. They just don't really have that. They're just out there hooping, which is fine, but whenever they need to win close/clutch games, they don't do it. They have Cade. One thing I do want to talk about is, should they trade Jay Ivey? I don't know his fit. I don't know if his fit long term is going to be good with Cade Cunningham. They're both not the best defenders. Cade is a bigger guard, and Jay Ivey's, I think, 6'4". He's just about average height. But for a 2 guard, he is a shorter 2 guard, because 2 guards are usually about 6'5" to 6'6". So he's a little bit on the shorter end. I'm just a little questionable on his future with this team. I think there are some better guys that could go and put along Cade, and I just don't think Ivey's that guy. Don't get me wrong, Ivey is an amazing player. Jaden Ivey, I love him. I love his game. Super athletic. I know a lot of people compared him to John Morant. I think he could be better on another team. I just don't think. I don't think the Pistons are the team. Maybe if he's coming off the bench, but I just don't know if he's the guy right now. And the third point, you want Detroit to kind of focus their rebuild around Cade, Asar, and Jalen Duren. Those are the 3 focal points of this rebuild. And just continue with that. Just focus on developing these guys, putting pieces that helps around them. So pretty much all these points is just helping them rebuild. So the next team I want to cover is going to be the Washington Wizards. And since I think they were the 3rd worst team, maybe the 2nd worst team in just power ranking wise, I think they should sell all of their assets that they have, which as of right now, I think is just Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. I don't think they have any more assets on this team. Is Monte Morris still on this team? I don't think so. Trey Jones, or no, Tyus Jones. I think that he's another guy they should get rid of. They should just completely buy into the rebuild, get draft capital, get young guys, just completely restart. There's no point in them trying to have, because the guys they have, they're not really vets, but they are role players that teams could use. You look at Denny Avdia. I think he's a guy they should keep, but he is someone they could trade. The next point I want to make with Washington's offseason is I would really love for them to draft a true franchise player, because as of now, their draft history has been very sketchy. They don't really have a guy on their team that can be that franchise player, and they're going to have a high draft pick, so they have to hit on it now. They have to hit this pick. You look at their draft history, they have Bilal Coulibaly, Denny Avdia, Johnny Davis, Corey Kispert, Rui Hachimura, Troy Brown Jr. Just the list just goes on. They have bad draft picks, and these guys, they're not bad players, but because they're drafted higher, they're in the lottery. These are all lottery picks. You would just kind of expect them to get some more talent. These are all just really good role players. They're not really any sort of star 1, 2, or maybe even a 3 option. They're just not that. Denny Avdia so far has been the best one. Bilal Coulibaly, we don't really know what's going on with him. They're developing him. He's looked decent, just not anything amazing out of him. The best draft picks they've had, honestly, has been Bradley Beal and John Wall. They did pick up Otto Porter Jr. at one point, but he's just another role player that they've had. So, I mean, just going back in history, they just don't really pick up those big guys except for John Wall and Bradley Beal. And I kind of already mentioned this. They just need to gather as many draft picks as they can. They need to get draft capital. OKC has a lot of that. There are teams that have a lot of that. They just need to figure out how to get that from those teams. So yeah, that wraps it up for the Washington Wizards. The next team I want to cover is the Hornets, which I have a strong opinion on because I'm a big fan of Nick Smith Jr. coming out of Arkansas, same age as me type stuff. And he didn't get to play this much. I don't know for sure if I'm pretty sure they fired Steve Clifford, which is good. I know a lot of Hornets fans didn't want him here because he just doesn't play young guys. You look at obviously Nick Smith Jr., Bryce McGowan's didn't really play that much. There just wasn't much young guys that are being played, and he's always been that way since they've drafted young guys. And speaking of coaching stuff, the next point I want to mention is I think they need to find the right coach for this young team that can help develop them and propel them, put them in winning situations that can help just give them game experience by playing these guys. I know this talks to JJ Redick, which I don't know if that'll work. He has never even been in a coaching position at all, so putting him in the head coach is a little risky, but I think they should do it. And this is a little bit of a stretch. I think they should explore options for LaMelo. He is constantly injured. Obviously, we know he's a good player, but in my opinion, he's not a winning player. I don't think he's a guy you can put on a championship level team. This might come back and haunt me, but I don't think he's a point guard, or I don't think he can really be your first or second option on a championship team. Just his play style, I just don't think he has that. He doesn't have the defense. He doesn't have the clutch scoring, which I guess he kind of does, but not really. He's more of just like a flashy kind of goofy guy. Honestly, he reminds me of Jason Williams, White Chocolate. Obviously, he's not white, but I just think that they should not really try to trade for him, but I think they should explore options, see what people are offering. Maybe San Antonio is willing to give up somebody to help pair Melo with Wemby, but we'll see. Moving on to the next team with the Raptors. The first point is just I think they should really buy into the rebuild. Because for the past few years, they've been just constantly retooling instead of just picking a direction. So they've just been mediocre for like the past 4 or 5 years. Since they won the championship in 2019, they've been mediocre. You did see them. They did make strides towards that, buying into the rebuild thing. They traded away OG Anunoby. They didn't re-sign Fred VanVleet, and they traded away Pascal Siakam. So they are really starting to step into that rebuild, which I think is good. But I think they need to buy into that more by selling their assets more. They have Gary Trent Jr., they have Jakob Poeltl at the center. They have guys they can get rid of while still keeping some in the back end just to help with development. And if for some reason, so that was my second option, my second note for this team is sell their assets. The third option I have for the Raptors, if for some reason they don't want to go into this rebuild, they need to be big-time buyers this offseason. Instead of just being mediocre, they need to step up and start competing if for some reason they don't want to rebuild. So that is my 3 notes for the Raptors. Moving on to the next team, we have the Nets. My first note is I want them to trade Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. They're both really good wings, but they're both role players. That's really all I have to say about that. They're not fit to be in the roles that they are on this team, especially Mikal Bridges. I feel bad for him. I know his efficiency went down, his scoring numbers went down, and people were starting to look at him different because he's not really put in the correct role. I'll talk about him a little bit more later once I mention other teams. But the next point about the Nets is I want them to give Cam Thomas the keys, give him the keys to the offense, let him just go out there and just free range. They started to do that more at the end, and I mean you can tell he is a scorer. He is a natural scorer. So they just need to buy into that and then just let the young guys hoop. Pretty much just saying just rebuild. Get rid of your players. Let your young talent develop. Build a team. Build a culture with this team. But yeah, those are my 3 points with the Nets. Moving on to the Hawks. They have been in a lot of talks just because of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. They pretty much, this is my first point, is they need to trade one of the guards. Which one of them? I really don't care at this point. Trae Young is their guy, but you look at DeJounte Murray, maybe Trae Young is more valuable so they can get more back from him. And DeJounte Murray, while he was playing without DeJounte Murray, while DeJounte Murray was playing without Trae Young, DeJounte Murray was hooping, he was balling. So they got to buy into one of those guys. Like I said, I don't care which one it is. The second point I want to bring up is I want them to either bring in Brandon Ingram, Mikal Bridges, and Tyler Hero. And you might be wondering, why do I say these names? Because they're all wings / 2 guards, combo guard kind of guys that can go out there and score. They just add more like dimensions to this team. And these are all guys that are probably going to end up being on the trade market this offseason. So those are 3 guys that I want them to pick up. And the third is I want them to develop an identity. As of recent, they like the past few years, they have had an identity. They've been a fast, athletic team, pretty much kind of like the Indiana Pacers are right now. But this last season, they didn't really have the identity. They were just middle of the pack in everything. They need to buy into that. They need to pick an identity. They need to develop that identity and just stick with it. And shout out Jalen Johnson for Chicago. So that's my 3 picks for the Hawks. For Chicago, if you aren't going to rebuild, please at least get rid of Zach LaVine. The reason I say that, which I'm pretty much gonna... No, it's not my next point. The reason I say that is because we saw at the end of this season that Kobe White and DeMar DeRozan can play together. Zach LaVine, however, just doesn't really fit this team at this point. I don't know where they send him. I just don't want him in Chicago anymore. I want ownership to sell the team because this ownership is just... Chicago fans, they know. They're just not really doing anything with this roster. They're just settling for mediocrity. They're just not really trying to do anything. They're not buying into a championship team. They're not buying into a rebuild. They're just kind of existing. And part of that is my third point is they need to try to get rid of Vucevic. He just doesn't fit this team. His value isn't very high right now, so maybe you shouldn't try to get rid of him and just let his contract run out. But the least you could do is try and get something in return for Vucevic. The next team I want to mention is the Heat. The first thing I want to mention, I've already mentioned his name actually. I think it's time to get rid of Tyler Hero. It's just not much to say. We saw flashes of it, especially game 2 of the Celtics series. He had his best game of pretty much his entire career where he developed that playmaking. It's time to move on from Tyler Hero because he hasn't shown much development in growing his game, just in terms of just an actual like consistent basis. Like I said, he showed in that one game. And the next point I want to bring up is don't worry about Jimmy's extension. Jimmy Butler's contract extension. I know there's a lot of talks of it right now. He don't want to extend him because he's asking for too much money. Jimmy Butler wants the money. He wants a longer contract. Makes sense because he is becoming an older player, but that's even more of the reason why you shouldn't sign him. He's been unhealthy these past few seasons. He's getting up there in age. His production's probably going to end up regressing sooner or later. I just don't think they should just keep buying into him and extending him. And I honestly don't even worry about the Heat. They're not the type of people that are going to try to stick with their players if they do what's best for the organization. And the third thing is they needed to just stick with it and develop Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic. So there's just 2 young guys that we saw in the playoffs just make strides and prove themselves to be good players. All right, the next team I'm going to mention is going to be the 76ers. And the first thing I want to say about them is don't build a super team. Don't build a super team. We've seen that these teams fail. I've already mentioned in my last episode, you look at the Suns, you look at the Clippers, you look at the Nets. These teams don't succeed. Because what happens is you end up putting all your investment and stock into these top 3 players, and if one of them gets injured, then you lose that, and you have no bench depth. But the 76ers have a lot of money to spend this offseason. They have $60 million, something like that. They need to get good surrounding pieces around Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. They need to surround these guys with good role players. I think they should try and bring back Buddy Hield, and they need to try to let go of... Don't worry about bringing back Tobias Harris if he wants more money than what you think he should. I think I mentioned that in my last episode as well. If he's wanting anything over $12 million, don't even worry about him. You don't need him. You really don't need him right now at this point. And we saw that his production in the playoffs just wasn't there. So moving on to the next team is the Orlando Magic. And I said this in the last episode as well. I think they need to go and get Jordan Poole. I mentioned that the Washington Wizards need to get rid of Jordan Poole, and I think the Orlando Magic is the perfect team to pick him up. Because while, yes, this season was not good for Jordan Poole, I'm not even going to sit here and lie. I know Jordan Poole is probably one of my favorite players, him and Bradley Beal. I'm not going to sit here and lie. Jordan Poole did not have a good season, but we saw him with the Warriors whenever he was in that 6-man option that he was super productive. He was one of the main reasons they won that championship. I think him and Orlando in that 6-man option, or maybe just a third scoring option on the team, is going to be perfect for this team because they need more scoring. Speaking of scoring, they need more shooting. That is my second point. They just need to pick up more shooters, just guys that can catch and shoot, maybe create their own 3-point shot. And then the third point I want to mention with Orlando is they need to move either Fultz, they need to move Markelle Fultz, or Cole Anthony. They need to clear up some more space. They have a lot of guard depth, and they need to get rid of one of those two. They could get rid of Anthony Black, but he's still just so young. You kind of want to develop him a little bit more. All right, and then the last team in the East is going to be the Bucks. It's glaringly obvious they need defenders. So they need to get either wing defenders, kind of like what the Timberwolves have. They just need to get guys that are just big, strong, and long. Pause. And then they also just need to get point of attack defenders, guys that can guard the point guard that is taking the ball up the court. They had that obviously with Drew Holiday, but they got rid of him. The next point I want to make with the Bucks is they need to either move Middleton or Brook Lopez. The reason I say this, they both had pretty good. They both had a pretty good playoff run here, especially Middleton. Without Giannis, he definitely stepped up. But the problem is Middleton is always injured and Brook is getting old. They're both getting old, but the main reason I want to move either one of them or maybe even both is just to bring down the age of this team and help expand the window to compete with Giannis and Dame. And the last thing is just build up the bench. They didn't have much bench depth this playoff run, and a lot of that was because of injuries. But they pretty much only had Bobby Portis. That was their bench guy, especially with Giannis being out. They just need to build up that bench. So those are all of the Eastern Conference teams. We are now going to move on to the Western Conference. All right, moving on to the Western Conference. The lowest seed we have is the Portland Trail Blazers. The first thing I just want to mention about them is they just need to be patient with Scoot's development. Obviously, he had a very poor rookie campaign. He did have good, just counting stats were good, but his overall efficiency and turnovers were very alarming. But he's going to need time to grow. He's shown flashes. He has the athleticism. He has the playmaking. He has just the overall awareness on the court. Just let it settle. And this is more so for the fans, not even really just leadership. Another thing I want to mention is I think they should maybe look at just exploring the idea of getting rid of Anthony Simons. The main reason I say that is because they have Scoot and because they have I can't remember his name. He's literally on my fantasy team. I had him on my fantasy team. He was injured. He went to Kentucky, didn't play because he was a freshman. I don't know why I can't remember his name. This is really bad. I got to look this up. Shane Sharp was the name I was thinking of. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. That was really bad. But because they have these two emerging young guards that are very promising. Anthony Simons, don't get me wrong, he's an amazing player. Amazing. He plays a lot like Damian Lillard. For those of you who don't know, both those guys did compete in a dunk competition. But yeah, they both play. I like Anthony Simons. I think a lot of teams could use him. One of those teams I've already mentioned is the Orlando Magic. I think this is a team that could use him. I think the Heat could use him. I honestly think that even the Pelicans could use him. Those are some teams. I think they should just explore maybe trading him, getting some draft picks. And another player they should move is Malcolm Brogdon. He's just an older player. And honestly, you don't even have to move him. This is a veteran you can use, just a locker room guy. He's shown it. He wanted Scoot to start at the beginning of the season. He was willing to give up that starting spot to help develop Scoot. He is a team player, but I think Malcolm Brogdon deserves to be in a place where he's going to compete. So those are my 3 points with Portland. The next team I want to talk about is the Spurs. The first point with the Spurs is I think they need to draft a past first point guard, someone that can just help set up Wemby, someone that they can develop with Wemby and be around the same age. And if for some reason they can't get a pass first guard, they need to get a skillful combo guard that can also create other than just Wemby. The next point is Trae Young. There's connections with him and the Spurs. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't see how it happens, but just mainly because the Spurs don't really have much to give back to help the Hawks out. So I don't think that's going to happen, but if it is a possibility, that is a fun possibility. And I think they just need to buy into the Wemby timeline. Stop trying to rebuild. At this point, you know what Wemby is capable of. Stop trying to rebuild and start trying to compete. Need I say more? Moving on to the Grizzlies. The first note with the Grizzlies is they need to trade their draft pick for this year because obviously they were very bad this year because they were missing out. They had a lot of injuries. They need to trade that pick because at this point they don't need that pick. They're trying to compete. They don't need this pick. Some teams I think that could use it is obviously I mentioned the Wizards. If somehow they can get Kyle Kuzma, that way they can move Desmond Bane over to his natural position at the 2 guard and they can get Kyle Kuzma to play in at that 3 spot. I would love to see that there. There are a few other spots they could do with that. But maybe even the Nets, if they can somehow get Mikal Bridges, that's another person that can move Desmond Bane up to his natural spot. Just pick up just a wing. Honestly, I'd like to see him pick up a wing with him. And the next point is just keep Ja out of trouble. I don't think he's going to get in trouble, but just a point. Just keep him out of trouble and just build some more depth. The honestly, they did kind of build up that depth with like they had like 30 players on their roster this year just because of injuries. But that's just another point. Just build up depth, just to kind of not develop, but build up depth that can like contend right now. So then moving on to the next team is going to be the Utah Jazz. The first point I want to make is just they need to build around Markkanen. And I think that starts with trading away they have a very big team, unless they want to go the route of like how the Timberwolves are doing and just keep a big team. They can do that. And honestly, with the Jazz, I don't really know what to say with them. Like, it felt like they were about to start the rebuild once they traded away Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, but they're still competitive. I don't know what to say with them. Just continue to grow, really. The next team is going to be the Rockets. I think they just need to continue to grow with the youth team, with the youth they have, the core they have. You look at Amin Thompson, they have Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green. Maybe they can somehow keep Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet, but they need to just develop this team. I think if they want to, if they can get the money, maybe they should name chase this offseason and just get one of those big free agents. Like, if I don't think this is ever going to happen, but if they can maybe get Paul George, Klay Thompson. Speaking of Klay Thompson, Orlando did have there have been mutual connections between them. I don't think Orlando should get Klay. If they do, don't try and force him into a starting role. Don't pay him too much. Okay, back to the Rockets. And they also need to figure out how to get Sengun and Jalen Green to work together, because this season, while one of them was out, the other performed significantly better. These guys need to figure out how to play together, just for the sake of their future and the Rockets' future. Moving on to the next team is going to be the Warriors. They need to retool. They need to focus on this Steph Curry timeline. They need to retool and rebuild this team around Steph. And that starts with getting rid of Klay, which is my second point. I don't know where they send him. They need to get rid of him. He doesn't fit this timeline. Don't worry about trying to re-sign him just because he's a legacy player for this team. I think it's good that they have new ownership. It might be easier for them to let go of Klay Thompson. And the next thing I just want to mention is, like I was kind of talking about with the Steph Curry timeline, they need to explore trades for Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. These are two young guys that are very promising. They have so much value. I think they need to get rid of these guys while they still have that value, and that can help rebuild a team around Steph Curry. I think they should keep Draymond Green. While he's a troublemaker, he is the engine of this offense. And then moving on to the very next player, or the very next team actually, is the Kings. My main point with them is they need to buy. They need to buy players. For those who don't know what it means to be a buying team, it means they're willing to spend money to get better players. They need to do that this year. Because you look at their last offseason, they stayed pat. They went with the idea of just keeping this team around. They have high morale. They have high team chemistry. They just want to keep just that consistency. Don't do that again, because we saw they went from being the 2 seed, or I think they were the 3 seed, one of those two, and they fell all the way out of the playoffs. They need to get a good player, and I think it's time for the next point I'm going to mention. I think it's time to move on from Kevon Huerter. It's Kevin Huerter, but he got that nickname last year, Kevon Huerter. He's just not been the most productive for this team, and you saw that this season. He's a guy they need to move on from, and they desperately need to re-sign Malik Monk. They cannot let him go away in this offseason. He is super pivotal for what this team is doing. Hopefully Malik Monk sees that, and his value, he could make more money somewhere else, but I think his value stays higher with this Kings team. The next team I want to mention, moving up in the standings, is the Lakers. My first point is, don't draft Bronny. Just because you want to keep LeBron or keep him happy, don't draft Bronny. Everyone knows he is not really NBA ready. If he does continue to go with the draft, don't draft Bronny. Next, don't let D'Lo walk for nothing. I know I'm pretty sure he's a free agent this season. Try your best to do a sign and trade. Just get something back for D'Lo. Anyways, my next point I want to mention is they need to move on from either Vanderbilt or Cam Reddish. The reason I say this is because they have both been injured pretty much this entire season. They need to pick one or the other. They can't have two pivotal, like, just depth pieces that are always injured and they both play the same position. They need to pick one or the other. And a little bonus is, don't target Trae Young either. He doesn't fit this team. He doesn't fit the timeline. Don't sell away all of your assets and all your depth to get Trae Young to build this big three. We've seen them try to do that with Russell Westbrook. Trae Young is a little different, but with Russell Westbrook, just don't do it. We've seen these big threes fail. I've already mentioned all the teams that failed. I'm not going to mention them again. So the next team I want to mention is going to be the Pelicans with I would love to see an Ingram DeJounte Murray swap, to trade Brandon Ingram for DeJounte Murray, just to build up that guard depth that they need, because the next point I'm going to mention is that Pelicans need to decide between Ingram, they have Trey Murphy, and they have Herb Jones. 3 guys that play the same position. They need to get rid of one of them, and I think Ingram has the most value, and they can develop Trey Murphy III, and they can develop Herb Jones, and I think they need to get one of those guys out of that position. I think Ingram is the guy. The third thing for the Pelicans, they need to tell Zion to stop getting these new baby mamas, and they got to tell him to stop getting this weight. He's got to get his weight down, stay on the diet. But this is stuff everyone knows. All right, 2 more teams. We're getting there. The next team I want to mention is going to be the Suns. I think they should just fire all ownership and leadership. We've seen in their post-game conferences this year, after they got eliminated, they're saying stuff like no team has ever been able to fully optimize Kevin Durant, which is not true. It's just not true. You look at his MVP years and his years with the Warriors, it's not true. And they're saying things like 27 out of 29 teams would want to trade spots with us. That's also not true. They're just being delusional. They need to get rid of these guys. And the second thing is, Coach Bud won't solve the problem. He is a good coach. But coaching is not the problem with this team. I've already discussed this last episode. Frank Vogel was not the problem. Coach Bud was not the problem. The building of the team is the problem, and that's why I say they need to fire ownership / leadership. And they just need to find any way they possibly can to strengthen the bench depth. They need to stop going out and getting these minimum ring-chasing old guys, and they need to develop real bench players, real role players. So that's the Suns, and the very last team I'm going to cover today is going to be the Clippers. The first point with them is Kawhi or Paul George worth keeping? Obviously, you want to keep one or the other, but is it worth keeping them both because of their age and because of their injury history? Kawhi didn't even play this postseason. I mean, he did, but he wasn't Kawhi. Paul George is notoriously injury prone. They need to pick one or the other, in my opinion. Honestly, I wouldn't say need to, but it would help with this timeline. I don't think they should completely go all out and just sell this team away and just completely be sellers. Because they have this rebrand in this new arena, they need to keep their fans engaged for this process. And one way they do that is by keeping Kawhi and PG and Harden and Russ. These are all like Cali guys that are from the area. Big names, obviously. They're going to help with this rebranding new arena. And the final point I want to mention is I think this is the very final year that they are allowed to run it back with the same core without rebuilding. If they run it back this year and they don't succeed, they need to move on from this core. They need to find a way to get rid of these guys, retool, rebuild, whatever they need to do. This is the last year that they are allowed to do this, in my opinion, as just an NBA watcher. So yeah, that was a lot of teams. That was 22 teams I just covered. Let me know in the comments down below if I maybe missed a big point of your favorite team, or maybe you disagree with me. I appreciate you guys for sticking in for this long, and hope I see you guys in the next one. Peace out.